So welcome to the pelvic floor workshop. It's one of my favorite workshops to teach. I've been teaching it for a few years now. And I think that one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is because it's such a major muscle group. And I think that people have a lot more connection or influence from the pelvic floor or to the pelvic floor than they sometimes know. And what I do see in movement circles or online or what have you about the pelvic floor can be misleading, I think, or only part of the story. And I just think that it can be done better. So that's my intention today. So the intention with today's workshop is to give you like a full meta view of your journey to healthy, well-functioning, dynamic pelvic floor muscle groups, I suppose. And so with that, we're going to talk about the pelvic floor to begin and understand clearly where it is in the body, what its functions are, and so on, just for a short amount of time. And then we're going to work on practices. So first, feeling the pelvic floor in the body, and then noticing the effect our breath has on the pelvic floor and that the pelvic floor has on our breath. And then actually learning a series of movements or exercises or awareness practices that you can integrate into your movement practices or your meditation practices or what have you to develop or maintain a healthy functioning pelvic floor. Because the pelvic floor is kind of the intersection between your spine and your hips. So there's a lot that goes on with regards to back pain, digestive issues, menstrual cycles, sexual issues, bladder, bowel, urinary issues that can all be influenced by the pelvic floor and the way that it functions. So most people become aware of their pelvic floor only when they actually have dysfunction, so they experience leakage or they're having a lot of pain during intercourse or they have digestive issues or so on. But there is a lot that we can do before issues come up to bring some vitality to this major muscle group. So while we're working on the exercises today, I want you to keep in mind that I'll often say feeling or imagining that such and such sensation. And the reason that I'm saying that is because for some people who have worked developing their pelvic floor muscles, they might actually experience sensation. But these are deep muscle groups. So deep muscles are those that are closer to the center of the body, closer to the spine, closer to the bone. They're often much smaller than the superficial muscles. Their action is intermittent, their action is long held. So it's things like the muscles along your spine that maintain an erect posture. We don't always notice those muscles are at work, but without them, we would be like flaps forward right now. And so it takes a more subtle perception to notice the action of these muscles and to then begin to like manipulate their function. So today, in the 90 minutes that we have together, it's reasonable to say that you might not in that time be able to do all of the exercises that I'm walking you through today. But again, my intention is to give you the full picture so that as you follow me on our journey, you might physically be stopping at a certain point. And then as long as you understand the process as it continues, then you'll have the blueprint or the map of where to go. So as sensation and as your awareness becomes more refined, then you will be able to do the next step, and you've already learned it. So when I say today, feel or imagine, the intention is that if you're not actually sensing, as long as you can visualize what it is that I'm explaining, then you'll have the roadmap that you need in order to continue this practice on your own. Does that make sense? Awesome. So to begin, I'm just going to click this button to share my screen and show you, this is like a visual diagram showing the differences between the male and the female pelvic floor. So this is a view as though you were like lying on the ground looking up. Just so that you have an idea, one of the things that I think people misunderstand about the pelvic floor is looking at it on a screen like this, it can seem as though the pelvic floor is like a flat object. So visualizing what this looks like, the muscles are very similar in function, but you can see these kind of go on the male side, they kind of go from right to left at the top, sort of straight across, and in this female side, it's like a diagonal down, a diagonal upwards, and these again go sort of straight across, but generally it's about the same, just slightly different shape. And where we're talking about on the body here is on this. So I'm showing you first on the skeleton, and they're the muscles that connect. If you sort of were to put a net right here, so imagine like a what is it called? Trampoline. Like a trampoline right across here. Because you can see in that last picture, there's actually holes in the orifice. So as this cavity is filled with organs, without our pelvic floor muscles in that space, there's nothing between our organs and open space. So our pelvic floor muscles are actually the base of our torso. And then we can see more closely from this angle. So this is the same angle you were just looking at in that last picture on like a 3D skeleton version. This little thing needs to be tightened. But you can imagine it filling this space here. So in fact, it almost is like this kind of cupped shape, because you can see that that's needed in order to fill the space of this, the bowl-shaped cavity. So it's not in fact straight across horizontal, but more of like a cupped shape. And the reason why it's important to know where in the body the pelvic floor is situated, in my opinion, is so that you can start to feel its function a little more. So that's where we're going to start today. So I'll show you a couple more views here that I've pulled up on the screen just so you have a good picture. So this is from behind. You can see this body in the middle, and the square shows you from where it's looking. And you can see how high up on the body this goes. So this is your low back, where most people consider your low back. If you follow the line down, this is like your tailbone sacrum. So like on your physical body, it would be about where the like crack of your butt starts. If you're not familiar where your tailbone is, that's about where it is. But that's how high up in the back the pelvic floor goes. So, and that's important to note, because as it attaches to the bones of the back, you can imagine the effect that it might have on low back pain, and the effect that the posture, the positioning of the low back and tailbone might have on these muscles. And again, if that's not so familiar to you, we're going to talk about that a little more. And lastly, this is a view looking downwards. It's not a great resolution, I apologize, but I do really like to show this image because it shows you a couple of things. So this is, it's sideways, first of all, not super helpful, but sideways. So over here, this is the spine. This is the front of the sacrum here. And all that I wanted you to see here is the difference of the muscle. So when people often work with when I hear of the pelvic floor and rehabilitation or maintaining health of the pelvic floor, what I often hear is Kegels. And Kegels are a exercise that works one specific muscle group of the pelvic floor. And so you can see these fibers back here are kind of larger fibers, less of them, whereas these are quite fine and there's many, many more fibers. Not only that, but they go in a very different direction. These are sort of straight across, whereas these are almost angular perpendicular. And so it isn't, while Kegels aren't, they're not bad for you necessarily. Sometimes they can be overused, but it's as though you only ever did bicep curls, and then you didn't know why your arm wasn't getting any stronger when you picked something up above your head. Because bicep curls are strengthening one specific muscle group of your arm. So that particular muscle group is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. But as the whole arm, the function is actually getting worse and worse and worse, because that muscle group is getting stronger, and all of our time and attention is being spent strengthening that, while the other muscle groups are getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So if all we ever did was movements in that range, we'd probably be okay. But the pelvic floor and the rest of our body requires a dynamic, there's a dynamic, it requires a different amount, a different task. It's holding the organs up, it's maintaining your ability to hold in urine or hold in fecal matter when you need to use the bathroom. It's involved in sexual encounters or intercourse. So it does a whole range of things, and it does them at the same time. So it's not the whole story to say that Kegels are all that you would need in order to have a healthy functioning pelvic floor. So now that we have this idea of what the pelvic floor looks like, we can actually start to understand that in our own embodied selves. So find yourself seated, and ideally you're sitting on the sitting bones. So the sitting bones are these bony protrusions at the bottom of your seat, or at the bottom of your pelvis. They're called the ischial tuberosities, and you can actually feel, like if you follow your hand up your leg, you can actually feel right into the center of your butt where those spaces are. I find it really useful to kind of lean forward a little, because most of us, or a lot of us, when we're seated, we're kind of seated like in this shape a little bit, sitting more on the tailbone. And so you want to kind of lean forward and find yourself sitting right up on those bony protrusions, and then support the shape of your spine. If the spine isn't used to being this extended, find a rolled blanket or a pillow or something to fill that space and make this sustainable. Now, because we're trying to connect to the way that the pelvic floor feels, I'd like you to grab your blanket or your rolled towel and bring it right underneath your body, making contact with the pelvic floor. So you're kind of going to sit up and bring the roll like lengthwise on your prop, or excuse me, on your seat rather, and then come down to sit. So I actually purchased this cork roller. I just got it in, honestly, from Half Moon, and that's what I'm going to use. And then I'm going to put it right down on my chair this way, so that when I'm sitting on my toe, and I might put a blanket over top of it just because it's a little bit hard. And then when you're sitting down on the sitting bones, you'll also be making contact along your pelvic floor. So just take a second to find that for you. If you're not in a chair, if you're on the ground and you're able to do so, a really great option is to come to kneeling with a couple of blocks stacked up beneath you, or a blocks and a bolster. And then trying to relax your body over this prop. So if you don't want sensation that's any more than about a 6 out of 10. So if this feels like pain, then maybe get a softer prop or roll it a little smaller. And then you're gonna lean your whole body to one side, lean your whole body to the other, trying to move, don't just move the spine, but actually move the pelvis. Like you're gonna sit more weight on one bum, sit more weight on the other, and then lean way forward to the front of the pelvis. And without tucking your tail under, lean back. And you're just gonna kind of continue to feel what this feels like in your body. All the while imagining or actually experiencing getting softer and softer, feeling almost like that prop is moving more and more up into your body. And if you visualize that image that I shared with you earlier of the pelvic floor, what we're actually doing here is a little bit of like a manual massage to these muscles. So it's the same benefits as if you were to take like a yoga tune-up ball or an Aki ball or a tennis ball and kind of roll it on the tissues, the fascia and so on. That's what we're doing here. But it helps to have something soft and large rather than like a yoga tune-up ball, for example, because some people really experience a lot of pain when you're doing this. So with regards to dysfunction, if you are worried about or actually experiencing dysfunction, I would say probably about 75% or more of my clients that I see and work with pelvic floor dysfunction, leakage, and so on, it's because of an overworked pelvic floor as opposed to a weak pelvic floor. So they're either clenching their butt or clenching the muscles of their belly or overusing those Kegel practices to the point that the muscles are fatigued. So let's go back to our analogy of the bicep curls. If you did 400 bicep curls and then you went to pick up a bag of groceries, your arms are going to be like cooked spaghetti, right? They're spent. And so a weak muscle or an underused muscle and an overused muscle, they actually show up the same in the body, which is dysfunction. So this practice that we're doing to begin with is relaxing the pelvic floor. And that's really the first step. So the first step in our journey towards regaining or maintaining pelvic floor health is to find ease in the pelvic floor. A healthy muscle is one that has the ability to contract as well as release or relax. And so here we're working on that relaxation component. I call it responsible release. So not so much massage and so on that we develop dysfunction where the muscle becomes, we're not able to bring it into engagement as when we need it, but not so much tension or contraction that we're not able to find the ease either. So as you're exploring this, if you're experiencing pain or what you would say is a sensation of like more than 6 out of 10, that know that this is where along this journey, this is where when you take the practices off of the mat, you'll spend most of your time. So until you're able to do this, and maybe when you first come to contact with the prop, there's a little bit of like sensation, but it ought to be less and less and less and less as you continue to do this kind of rocking practice side to side, or think of like cat-cowing the pelvis back and forth. If it's creating more and more and more discomfort, you're going to just do little tiny amounts every couple days until this area of the body is able to like relax. So you can stay in this shape. You could stay with the prop beneath you if you're not experiencing any pain. Or you could remove the prop and just simply visualize what this feels like. And now we're going to notice the relationship between the breath and the pelvic floor. So again, I'd like you to imagine where the pelvic floor is in your body. And then feel with your fingers where you feel the bony rib cage. So feel it, if you can feel with your fingers all the way around the bottom of your bony ribs. That whole space, this whole cavity, is also filled with a similar diaphragm. So the pelvic floor is sometimes referred to as the pelvic diaphragm. This whole space from the back rib all the way forward to the sternum and all the way down is also filled with a diaphragm, which is our breathing diaphragm, what most people think of when we think of the diaphragm. And they share a lot of similarities. So the breathing diaphragm is the floor of your sternum, and the pelvic diaphragm is the floor of the abdomen. The breathing diaphragm, sitting in its relaxed state, is kind of shaped in this upward shape like this to fit into the space. As the breathing diaphragm contracts, it almost, you can imagine it kind of moving downwards. It doesn't move that much, but imagine that it goes from peaking up to down, like somebody standing on that trampoline. And as it does that, it's creating more space here, which makes a vacuum, and air comes in to fill that space. So as you breathe in, your chest and your sternum expand because the air is filling the lungs, which are hiding behind your ribs here. And your breathing diaphragm moves down. As a result, all of the organs that are below the breathing diaphragm also move down slightly. And there's an added pressure to the pelvic floor, which also moves down. So everything kind of goes this direction. And then as you exhale, so the diaphragm will relax and air is pushed out of the lungs. More space is created in the cavities of the belly, and the organs can shift back up, and your pelvic diaphragm, then contracts to bring some engagement. So essentially, as you breathe, it's sort of this motion or this idea. Imagine that happening. And we call that piston breath. You can't see my diaphragm, so I'm doing it like this, the piston breath. So you breathe in, this happens, then there's added pressure on your pelvic floor. You breathe out, and this happens. So maybe staying situated on your prop, notice as you breathe in, maybe you can notice as air comes into the lungs, there's this pressure from inside moving out. So you might notice the chest expanding. And again, I'm exaggerating this movement so that you can have that visual. Most of us can sort of feel what that feels like, that inward pressure pushing out. If you're able to relax enough and really be sensitive, you might also be able to feel that slight additional pressure down into the pelvic floor. So unclenching your seat, relaxing the pelvic floor. It's important if you are feeling like you have to clench to hold yourself up, lean into some props. Try to find this erect posture as comfortable as possible. And see if you can notice easy breath in and out through the nose. It can be soundless. It doesn't have to be a huge gulping breath. But just as you might notice that inward pressure pushing out towards the chest, see if you can notice that inward pressure moving down towards your pelvic floor. If it helps you to bring awareness inwards, you're welcome to close the eyes. And once again, if that's not something that you physically are experiencing, can you imagine that relationship? So breathing is something that we do all day long. A lot of people are chest breathers, so they use a lot of the accessory muscles behind the breathing diaphragm to breathe. And that can cause a lot of tension in the neck and in the shoulders. As well, we're not using the diaphragm the way that it ought to, or the way that we ought to, rather. So first, making space for that breathing diaphragm to move is really important. So that's why we first found a shape that was erect. We created as much space in our body as possible, because if you're slouching over, like hunching over, that breathing diaphragm can't function. And as well, most of the time, if we're hunching over this way, we're kind of tucking the tail under this way. And so our pelvic floor diaphragm also can't engage in the same way. And so even just spending a few minutes, we breathe, I don't even remember how many times in a day that we breathe, many, many, many times a day. And even to bring your attention to these two diaphragms for a couple of minutes a day can make a huge, huge difference. So I'll show you again like a visual of this, in case you're more of a visual learner and what I haven't shared so far is helpful. So as you inhale, this is the cavity above your breathing diaphragm here, and this is the cavity above your pelvic floor diaphragm. So as air fills, the breathing diaphragm moves down, the pelvic floor diaphragm moves down, and the belly moves out. So you can imagine the whole cylinder, actually the back also expands out. There's like a missing piece there, but imagine arrows moving left and right in the body here. So imagine this 360-degree expansion all the way around the belly and then down, down. So the whole canister is, there's pressure above and below, and then that pressure is moving outwards as air moves in. Then as air moves out, the muscles of the abdominal wall move in, the muscles of the back move in, the pelvic floor lifts, the diaphragm lifts, and the air moves out. So it kind of becomes chicken and egg. If we can bring more and more of our attention to this breath, you can see all of the muscles that are involved along the whole upper body. It actually helps us to maintain or correct postural issues. And as well as we correct postural issues or maintain a healthy posture in our spine, we have enough space to create healthy breathing patterns. So they kind of feed into one another. It's only in this kind of erect spine, neutral curvatures, that we have the opportunity to engage the full spectrum of muscles that are involved in diaphragmatic breathing. And the reason that I like to teach diaphragmatic breathing first is because, like I say, we breathe so many breaths in a day. We really have this unlimited opportunity to be training with the pelvic floor. So the first and most important of the journey is ensuring that we have the ability to release the engagement of the pelvic floor. Once we're sure that that's able to happen, then we're working on having a bit of a dynamic pelvic floor that can naturally, without you intervening in any way, can you feel that contraction and release happening on its own? Then we can begin to strengthen the muscles of the pelvic floor, especially as our lifestyle changes and the requirements of the pelvic floor increase, like if in pregnancy, if we were to gain weight as we age, and so on. And so now we're going to do set up in the same way. So find yourself seated on that pelvic floor muscle, or right on top of the pelvic floor rather, in the neutral spine. You're going to visualize or experience that diaphragmatic breath. So we are breathing, obviously, But see if you can notice as you inhale, the chest expanding. And as you exhale, the chest expansion moves back to kind of neutral. And then see if you can notice as you inhale that as air fills the lungs, inward pressure moves left and right out, kind of along the ribs, front of your belly, back of the spine. So it's like a 360-degree outwards expansion as you breathe in, and then as you breathe out, that's released. And notice, can you experience it in the front, sides, and back? Maybe one of those quarters are more dynamic than the others. And then visualizing the pelvic floor. So imagine that you're sitting on top of a diamond shape, and that diamond is from the front of your pubic bone, the front of your body on the pubic bone, to the back of your body at the tailbone, and then left to right across your sitting bones. So visualize this diamond shape that you're sitting upon, the muscles that come together to form the pelvic floor. And as you inhale, the chest expands and the 360 torso expands. There's also an inward pressure moving downwards onto your pillow, onto the little roll beneath you, into the pelvic floor, and then that dissipates as you exhale. Nothing too intense. Try not to force anything happening here. Trust in the process. It takes a lot of time for muscles that surround the breathing muscles to ease if they're used to being engaged. So trust that that is happening. And a couple more breaths here. And then we're going to take this practice to our yoga mat. So I'll encourage you, take your time to set yourself up. The reason why I want to move the practice to the yoga mat is because that means that any time that we come to our mats in our yoga practice, it'll give us the opportunity to remember these practices and integrate them into what we're already doing, into the time we're already committing to movement practices. And the other reason why I like to do so is because it can often reflect positions that we find ourselves in sleep. So I'm going to take my folded blanket and bring them behind my head like a little pillow. That's totally optional for you. If you like to have that added support, you can. I'm going to grab just a block here. So in lieu of a block, you'll use your rolled blanket. I've got my strap here. If you don't have a strap at home, you could also use just a belt or a scarf as long as it's not stretchy. We're going to come to lie flat on the back. So try to find your spine relatively neutral here, so you're not exaggerating any of the curvatures of your spine. And then Bend your knees and bring your feet to the mat. And once again, supporting this shape with the knees bent and the feet to the mat by, if there's naturally a space between the legs, you're going to fill that space with your rolled towel, or if you have one, a block. And then take your strap and strap around your thighs and that prop, whether it's a block or a rolled towel or what have you. You're going to strap around the whole structure. So whatever you're using, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it can hold your legs there without you having to use your hands. And experiment here with your feet a little wider, feet a little closer. Ideally, once you have the strap or the strap block combination, you'll be able to relax your legs completely, even in this bent shape. And ideally, we're resting. The first part of your body that's making connection is your sacrum, that flat little part of the bone right above your butt crack. That's your sacrum. If your tail is tucked under, the first part of your body that's going to make contact is more like the low back area. So I really want you to try to first maybe arch a little into your back and first make contact with that tailbone sacrum area. Sometimes it's something that's been trained into us to kind of flatten the spine. So as long as you don't have to clench or there's no pinching, holding yourself there, sometimes I'll kind of lengthen my upper body away from that sacrum. I almost like inch my upper body upwards to feel like it's pulling away from the sacrum to make a little more space. But nonetheless, my sacrum is the first point of connection to the floor. Arms wherever they're comfortable. And here, without the feedback against the pelvic floor, can you find that diaphragmatic rest? Can you feel on your inhale the expansion of the chest? Can you feel that release on your exhale? Can you feel on your inhale the expansion of the rib cage, the front of your belly, and your back? And again, can you feel that release on your exhale? And then can you inhale and feel that little pressure down on the pelvic floor that releases as you exhale? Visualize that diamond shape. So now the diamond would be facing on the wall straight in front of you. You're not sitting on it anymore. From the sacrum, low back that you're resting on, so it kind of curls up at the back, forward to your pubic bone. So you can actually push down on the front of your like low belly, your pubic area, and you'll feel that pubic bone. And then left to right across sitting bone to sitting bone. So you're going to visualize that diamond. And as you inhale, can you imagine or feel a little bit of added pressure on the diamond moving out? And then as you exhale, that pressure dissipates. So again, you're going today to stop somewhere along this journey that makes sense in your body. So if you're still working on finding that release of the pelvic floor, that's as much of the physical sensation that you're going to work for today, but then keep your mind engaged so that you're still able to know the map. If you're able to find ease with that responsible release, now we're trying to feel, can you relax and contract? So as you exhale, I'd like you to visualize the four corners of the diamond moving closer to each other, almost as though the pelvic floor is moving up in towards your body. So as you inhale, we've got this expansion moving down, putting pressure down on the pelvic floor. And as you exhale, you're actually going to contract the whole diamond so that it feels almost like it's lifting up a little into your body. Can you relax that to allow for the expansion on your inhale? And then contract just the area. Bring sitting bone closer to sitting bone. Bring pubic bone closer to tailbone. Also, as you're trying to pull and something up through the orifice of your body. And most importantly, can there be a contraction followed by a release? Followed by a contraction, followed by a release. Notice if some accessory muscles are getting involved. So notice if you're clenching your low back or your abdomen. Bringing your brain to these 4 points of the diamond, it's more effective for you to visualize this action happening, even if there's no actual movement of the musculature of the pelvic floor. It's more beneficial to your body that that relationship is happening between brain and tissues than that you're manipulating that action by moving your spine or clenching the abdomen or the butt. So in fact, your butt is relaxed while you do this, eventually finding just the pelvic floor muscles being targeted. Can you do that without holding your breath? If not, can you visualize what would it feel like the pelvic floor and the pelvic floor, excuse me, sitting bone to sitting bone, pubic bone to tailbone to all move closer to one another. So this is our piston breath practice. Anytime that you're in a posture in your yoga class that you're in stillness, you could practice this breath. When you're at a red light, you can practice this breath. As you lie to get comfortable for bed, you can practice this breath. When you're sitting on the toilet, you can practice this breath. Any external cues that you can use to be a sort of reminder to integrate this practice into your life will benefit you. There's so many opportunities in a day for you to practice piston breathing. Breathing in, relaxing, pressure moving down and away from the pelvic floor, and breathing out, pressure moving up into the body, engaging those 4 corners. So we're gonna let that go for a moment. Find your natural breath, move your body however you'd like here. Just take a little moment, take a bio break if you'd like, have a drink of water if you'd like. If we were working one group of muscles, like if this was a 90-minute squat class, the muscles are going to fatigue. Even the most healthy dynamic muscles are going to fatigue. So give yourself permission to stop practicing for a moment or two and move your body here. Just for another couple of breaths. And then we're going to go back to the same position that we were in, this time without the strap. Or the block. You're going to make your way back down to your mat. Finding that neutral spine. Positioning your feet comfortably to the mat. So not so far away that your toes and the balls of your feet don't feel like they're grounded, but not so close that it feels like it's arching your spine here. Somewhere in between. Comfortable to the knees. And here, relax your butt. Can you still feel that inhale, expansion down to the pelvic floor? Exhale, contract the four corners of your diamond. And remember that that contraction doesn't have to be 1,000% all of your effort contraction. So because it's a long practice today, let's set a goal of contracting just as much as you can to feel the sensation. When you first feel sensation, that's all you need to do. The inhale, it releases, there's expansion. Exhale, contract just as much as you need to feel sensation and nothing more. Can you contract as you exhale? So it isn't exhale, then contract, or contract, then exhale. But as you exhale, there's a slow, gradual contraction. Now feel how the weight of your body is positioned equally across your sacrum. So if I lean to my right, I can feel more weight on my right hip, on the right side of my low back. If I lean to my left, I can feel more weight on my left hip and the left side of my low back, or upper, like the left side of my butt. So I'm going to try and position myself right on top of that sacrum, that flat landing at the base of the spine, so that I can feel like I'm perfectly balanced left to right. Now, because of the variety of different postural variation and behavioral variations between left and right, that may or may not be your normal. So just notice at rest what your normal feels like. Maybe you have a little more weight on your one hip than your other. Maybe your legs lean, maybe there's more weight in one foot than another. That's good to know for practices where you're working to correct and balance posture. For today, we just want to notice where your neutral is. And then we're going to maintain that neutral. So in a moment, we're going to move the leg in the hip socket and march. So sort of keep the leg in the same shape that it is, but bring the knee to chest. And the goal as we do so is to try to keep the whole torso in the same neutral space that it is now, and try not to push off the opposite foot. So in essence, the muscles that are going to help us do this are the pelvic floor muscles. So if your pelvic floor muscles are not very well developed yet, know that that's going to be the next step on your journey. So as long as you understand today what I'm describing, then you know what you're going to do next. So we'll find pelvic floor expansion, pelvic floor contraction, easy breath. Unclench your butt. Don't push the feet. Same exercise we did before. Now, as you exhale, you're going to lift your left foot off the floor, moving just at the left hip crease without moving the hip, without changing the shape of your spine. Inhale, and then the right. Going down, you'll inhale, lifting up the other leg. So we're switching back and forth. Inhale, both feet are flat. Exhale, the right leg lifts up as you contract the pelvic floor in. And the shape of my spine doesn't change, so I'm not adding any wrinkles to my shirt here. And again, this is a practice. It will take time to develop. Most of the time I notice as you put your foot back down to the floor, you might notice a good kind of shift back into place. That's how you know that as you lifted the foot, the hips shifted slightly. So notice as I bend, the wrinkles in my shirt don't change. The only place that's moving here is the crease of my hip. You're not able to see, but if you had a camera looking straight down, the wrinkles on the side of my body aren't changing either. My hips aren't lifting left and right. Do this a few more times just to understand the mechanics of the movement, maybe to experience what it is that I'm describing. And then letting that go and moving your body however it's craving. Again, let go of the breathing practice for a moment. Move however you need to move, whatever your body's craving, and take as many breaks to do so as you need to, with or without my prompting. As you integrate these new awarenesses into your body, doing so in a way that makes sense to you. And so after a couple breaths here, take all the time you need if you still feel like moving differently. We're going to slowly roll to one side and come up to kneeling. If hands and knees doesn't feel comfortable for you, we're going to find the same cat and cow shape against the wall, and I'll show both options. So I'm going to make a little bit of space at the end of my mat to show the option if you're going to do seated cat and cow. If you're okay to come to hands and knees on the floor, you're still welcome to come to cat and cow against the wall if you'd like, but you'll just ignore the option that you're not using today. So if you're not as comfortable coming to hands and knees, grab yourself a chair. Ideally a chair that has a seat that's parallel to the floor. And try to make sure that at least, if you don't, especially if you don't have, this chair's a special yoga chair, so it's actually made with grippy bottoms. But if you don't have that, then make sure that at least two of the legs of your chair are on your mat, so that, or on a carpet, so that it's not gonna slide. So I'll first demonstrate in the chair, then I'll move to the floor. So if you're doing this in the chair, you're gonna sit, I like to sit towards the edge of the chair, so I'm right up on those sitting bones. And then if you can with straight arms, the arms can be as wide as you'd like, legs wherever they're comfortable. And here, you're gonna imagine as though you're on the ground in cat and cow. So we can arch the belly forward, lift the chest, bring the shoulder blades together, look up and stretch the front of the body, and then contract the front of the body, tuck your tail, round the back of the body, stretching into the back of the body here. Inhale, we're contracting the back of the body, stretching long on the front, pulling shoulder blades together. Exhale, shoulder blades move away from each other. We're pushing into the wall, rounding the tail, and finding a cat on Halloween night. On hands and knees, it's very similar. As you inhale, the same happening, just a different relationship to gravity. And as you exhale, contracting the front of the body to round. So we'll understand the mechanics of the shape first. Let's externally rotate the arms so it feels like you're holding a water balloon in your underarms, and don't let it go even as you arch your spine up. Belly expands, back contracts. Belly contracts, back expands. And now come to neutral seated shape, wherever that is. So you can stay just in the neutral hands and knees if you'd like, or in your chair, and we'll find our diaphragmatic or piston breath. So here, we don't have the sensation on the pelvic floor or anywhere along our body. So we're in free space. Can you still feel that 360 expansion? Can you feel the expansion of the chest on your inhale? Can you feel the expansion down to the pelvic floor? And as you exhale, can all of those ends of your cylinder contract inward? So imagine, really visualize that diamond shape as you contract and engage in that diamond shape inward. And then we're going to go back to our shape in cat and cow and try to find diaphragmatic breath here. Inhaling, everything expands outward, relaxing the pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the body, pull in towards the belly button, lift the pelvic floor up. Inhale, expand. Exhale, contract. Notice how this changes your relationship to this pose, or how this pose changes your relationship to your piston breath. And go ahead and find this at the rhythm of your breath. So feel free to ignore my rhythm of breathing and move to your own breath. If this stops making sense to you, if it kind of becomes confusing, just pause and refocus on that diaphragmatic breathing again. Take a break whenever you need to. Maybe another 2 or 3 breaths. And then find yourself at rest. You can rest in a pose of ease, or you can move if you feel like moving. So here we're still practicing that piston breath, or that diaphragmatic breath. Inhaling to expand, thinking of letting the pelvic floor relax. Exhaling to think of contracting those 4 corners of the diamond. And then it gets a little more challenging when we add movement on top of that. So now we're working in a movement practice like cat and cow. When you're ready, we're going to come up towards standing, maybe standing close to a wall or close to your chair if you have one for a little extra support. Now, in order to maintain the what I'm looking for, in order to best support our pelvic floor, I'll say, you can notice that if your legs are really wide apart, it's more difficult to imagine or experience those 2 corners of the diamond, the seat of your sitting bone, the seat of your sitting bone, moving towards one another. Because the muscles of your pelvic floor are already being stretched as your legs move further away from each other. So with what I like to visualize is like as though the arch of my foot is right under my kidneys. Sometimes that feels a little snug depending on the width of your thighs. So find whatever feels comfortable for you so that as you bounce your knees, it feels like your whole body is connected on top of itself. And then we need to reorient our understanding of our neutral spine once again, because now our sitting bones are pointing straight down. So if I were to bend my leg right at the hip crease, I'm sitting right on the sitting bone. So just like when we're seated, a lot of people, when they stand, kind of like gravity take over, and they'll either do this, and they're kind of sitting towards the pubic bone, or they'll do this, and their tail's tucking under. So I want you to try to find yourself in relatively neutral spine. I almost think of like pushing the top of my head up into the ceiling slightly, but not just the top of my head, like lifting my whole body up against gravity, letting the arms hang heavy. Unclench your butt here as much as you can and still maintain standing. And your chair or the wall is there if you want to hold onto it for extra support, or you could let your arms hang. Excuse me. So take your hands and place them right on the bony rib cage that you can feel. And as you breathe in, feel that internal pressure moving the hands outwards. And feel that pressure release as you exhale. And then maybe bring one hand to the belly and the other palm up on your back. And notice, if you can, that expansion outwards as you inhale and the contraction inwards as you exhale. Now engaging your legs so that more leg than butt are supporting you. So I like to visualize the muscles that I would use if I were going to turn my feet into a V shape. So keeping your toes facing forward, but engage those muscles. Almost like you're holding a piece of paper between your upper thighs. Now, can you maintain the leg muscle engagement just as much as you need that you first feel the muscle? Not so that you're clenching every muscle in your body. Can you maintain that in your leg and slowly relax your butt? Legs engaged, butt relaxes as much as possible. Legs engaged, butt relaxes. So that now maybe you're able to experience, as you inhale, that added pressure moving down on your pelvic floor. And as you exhale, engaging the four corners. So without clenching your butt, engage sitting bone to sitting bone, pubic bone to tailbone. And remember, these are deep muscles. So the engagement that I'm talking about is going to be way more subtle than the superficial muscles of your gluteus maximus, of your bum, or of your thigh. It's not the abdomen, although you might start to feel some energy in your abdomen. It's not your butt. It's just these series of independent deep muscles. And yes, they attach to those other muscles, but we're really trying to target in, visualize those images I showed at the beginning of the practice, and visualize those muscle fibers engaging and releasing. So once you have that awareness and that ability to control here, we're going to take the hands to the waist or the heart, or hold your chair if you'd like, and do the same practice that we did lying down. So you're going to inhale here, feel the pelvic floor expand, and as you exhale, without changing the shape of your spine or your hips, you're going to bend your left knee right at the hip crease, bring your left leg off the ground. Inhale, both legs are straight, not locked. Pelvic floor expands. Exhale, engage the pelvic floor up, lifting and bending at the hip crease. So you might feel your body sway side to side as you lift the leg, but the hips themselves are not going to inch. So again, the wrinkles of your shirt ought to stay the same. Inhaling Exhaling to engage the pelvic floor up, lifting at the crease of your hip. Engage, or rather relax, inhale. As you exhale, engage that pelvic floor to lift up. So here we're actually using the strength of the pelvic floor to help us in our balancing shape. Pause it for a couple breaths in center if you need to. Reconnect to that piston breath or that diaphragmatic breath. Engage legs, not butt. And then attempt this practice. No rush, finding your breath here. And once again, if this isn't happening for you today, this is where we're working towards. And it means that our yoga practice gives us a great opportunity. When you find yourself in any pose, can you engage that piston breath in this way? And then let's move a little bit. Let that practice go. Let the breath go if you'd like. So we've worked on responsible release. We've worked on a healthy functioning release, a healthy functioning muscle of being able to contract as well as release. So now we're going to work on, then we integrated that practice into our other movement practices, whether that's walking, yoga, any kind of exercise or movement practice that you have. So now let's talk about refining that engagement. So I'll invite you back to a shape that you feel most comfortable. I'm going to come into the chair because then I can find that neutral spine, but you could also do this against the ground if you'd like. You could do this using your engagement against the pelvic floor if that's something you resonated with. We're going back to the piston breathing once again, or the diaphragmatic breathing, and refining a little bit. So just take your time and find yourself seated on your pelvic floor with a neutral spine in whatever shape feels most comfortable for you. I'm going to take this beautiful new prop that I bought behind me to support my back. And then really connect to how this is feeling in your body and whether it is in fact supporting you in the way that you thought it would. Step one, let's find ease in the pelvic floor so that we're able to feel like soft over top of the prop beneath you. Step two, can you feel that pelvic floor contracting and releasing, kind of without your influence? So are you able to relax enough that you can notice that dynamic nature of the pelvic floor? And are you able to tune in with your sensitivity to feel this very subtle change in energy as you inhale and as you exhale. Visualize that diamond shape. And as you exhale, visualize all four corners of the diamond moving in towards your body, kind of into each other and almost like they're coming up into your body. Inhale, that's releasing. Exhale, it's contracting. And now the next time that you have the opportunity to engage the pelvic floor, so on your next exhalation, I want you to imagine or experience relaxing the front and the back of the diamond, and imagine just bringing sitting bone closer to sitting bone. So kind of the two sides of the diamond moving in and relaxing out while the rest of the diamond stays neutral. Inhale, everything's relaxed. Exhale, the two sides, sitting bone to sitting bone, move in towards each other. Inhale, relax. Exhale, engage. Let that go for a couple of breaths. Back to your easy, smooth expansion and release. And the next time you exhale, I want you to imagine the front and the back of that diamond moving in towards each other, the two sides staying neutral. Inhaling, everything is soft. Exhale, bring your pubic bone and your tailbone closer together by engaging that musculature. Everything relaxes on your inhale. And as you exhale, visualize the engagement, pubic bone to tailbone, without clenching your butt, without clenching your abdomen. And then again, letting that go, moving as you feel like moving, be still as you feel like being still. We're going to tune back in to our diaphragmatic piston breath. Inhale, everything expands. Exhale, everything contracts. Remember, just till you first feel sensation, especially now that we're rounding the last base here of our practice. The muscles, if you've been able to follow all the way along, those muscles will be fatiguing. So allow yourself to be comfortable with understanding in your brain what it is that I'm asking you to engage without feeling that engagement if in your body, if the muscles just haven't developed to that point yet or are like just pooped. Now, let's find that piston breath, or that diaphragmatic breath, expanding the four corners, engaging the four corners. And as you next exhale, engaging just the top of that diamond, sitting bone, and pubic bone. Almost the same sensation that you would have if you were trying to stop the flow of urine without engaging your butt. Inhale, it relaxes. Exhale, it contracts. And if that's something that you're comfortable with, then you can start to experiment. How could you feel 1% contraction? How could you feel 100% contraction? 30% contraction. So we're working on refining the function of these muscles by applying different stimulus and seeing what happens. Then letting that go. And again, finding your comfortable breath. Move if you need a little movement break. When you're ready, try to tune back in with that piston breath or diaphragmatic breath. Expanding on your inhale, contracting the four corners as you exhale. Just so you first feel sensation, expanding on your inhale, contracting the four corners as you exhale. And then I'd like you to engage just the back part of your pelvic floor. So sitting bone to tailbone. The sensation might be similar to that if you were clenching your anus muscle, but without clenching your seat or your butt, your gluteus maximus. Relaxing the pubic bone. Just engaging the back half of that diamond shape. 3 corners moving in together as you exhale. All 4 corners expanding on your inhale, and just the 3 corners contracting as you exhale. And then let's let that go again. And once more, serve your body as it needs to move. Reconnect your breath. Walk around if you need to. And now I'd like you to imagine the pelvic floor not just as this structure at the low part of your body, but almost like an elevator moving up into your body. So imagine that the pelvic floor extends upward from the base of your pelvis all the way to the belly button. So you've got that few inches of space. And imagining that space divided into the basement being that bottom level of your pelvic floor, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, the penthouse or the roof at the very top near your belly button. So we're working on engaging and contracting the whole pelvic floor, that whole diamond. We're going to start by going from the basement just to the first floor. So again, just till your first feeling sensation is our goal here. To the first floor, till your first feeling sensation. And then we'll inhale, basement, exhale to the penthouse. So 100% engagement. Inhale, expansion, exhale, 100% engagement. And then just to the second floor. Then back to the first floor. To the penthouse. To the third floor. So you're going to continue to vary which floor you're moving into. So we're not just engaging more or engaging less, but also engaging as though we're moving up higher in the body. And then we'll let that go, move a little bit, breathe a little bit. Take a sip of water if you need. And coming back to center. So we started off, once we understood where the pelvic floor is in the body, then the first goal is finding responsible release, as much ease as possible, especially when we're fully supported in a seated shape. There really isn't a lot of work that the muscles of the pelvic floor are that they require in that shape. So we ought to be able to find as much relaxed and ease as possible without pain in that shape. Then we moved through some movements to feel, or breathing rather, to feel the engagement and the release that happens as we breathe, that sort of jellyfish-like structure. I like that visual of like jellyfish. And then we had some control. So when we're balancing, when we're moving the leg, how we can use our pelvic floor and the engagement of the pelvic floor to maintain neutral spine while we're in movement. And after that, working on refining that engagement. So it's not just 0 to 100, but maybe a little bit, maybe a little more. So wherever you find yourself on that journey today is less relevant as long as you understand the process. Then you'll have a good understanding of where you can go. Once you've mastered one step of the journey, you could go to the next, you could go to the next. And it really is a lifelong apprenticeship, not just because there's so much that we could do and to be creative with how we use the pelvic floor, but also because our bodies and our needs change as our life changes, as our bodies change as we grow older. So how you engage with the pelvic floor might also change depending on your needs. So I'm going to open up with any questions or clarifications that you have, and I'll stop the recording here and also invite you, if you do have questions after the workshop that you would like, you can always email me at carly@carlystong.com, Stong not strong, or you can message me across any of my Instagram or Facebook platforms at Carly Stong as well.